They told us America was different, that here the rule of law was sacred, children were protected, and no one could be disappeared without due process. But if you listen to Representative Delia Ramirez on the House floor, you'd wonder if any of that is still true. Because the accusations she laid out against Kristi Noem, the current Secretary of Homeland Security, aren't just disturbing. They sound like the blueprint of authoritarianism. And the most chilling part, if Ramirez is right, it's all being done with your tax dollars in your name and without your consent. Ramirez didn't come to play politics. She came with a list of charges that made the room fall silent.
Recognize Ms. Ramirez for 5 minutes on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. A few weeks ago, right from this dais, I talked about the hypocrisy of these Republican policies. We're talking about gutting services that working people rely on while writing blank checks for ultra-wealthy bosses. Well, here we are again. We're back from recess, and Republicans are looking to cut $1.5 trillion in funding for our communities. But today, we're considering also a $69 billion infusion into an agency that is violating our rights, undermining due process, and blaming administrative errors for their criminal behavior. And this gift to Trump and Noem comes without oversight, which Republicans on this committee have proven either unwilling or incapable of. Case in point, my request to conduct an oversight visit in El Salvador was publicly denied in the press, despite evidence that Noem spent $6 million of taxpayer dollars to disappear immigrants to a foreign prison without due process. The committee is considering this massive infusion of capital into the department without holding a single hearing with Secretary Noem, a request that I have made and others several times to this body, and I'm making again today. Secretary Noem has to come before this body and answer our questions about the department's unconstitutional, illegal, and inhumane activities. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a letter requesting Noem come before the committee to testify. In case, I can keep going, I can do it at the end if you'd like.
We can do it now. So ordered.
Thank you. In case there's any question about what those unconstitutional, illegal, inhumane activities are, let's revisit some of them for the record. Republicans are seeking to fund the wasteful spending of this administration after Trump and Noem already wasted $300 million in 6 weeks to militarize the border. The administration says they're committed to legal immigration while they are cruelly canceling the appointments of thousands of immigrants who legally sought asylum in our country. Trump and Noem have even denied children, 2-year-old children, their basic right to face immigration proceedings with a lawyer, including children going through cancer treatment. Since January, Trump and Noem have used ICE to terrorize our communities, profiling Latinos and arresting U.S. citizens, like the man who was detained in Chicago after buying a slice of pizza, despite of the fact the guy was carrying his ID and his Social Security card, and the Puerto Rican veteran in New Jersey. Folks, these are the same people who launched a $200 million anti-immigrant ad propaganda campaign with your constituent taxpayer dollars. And then, last month, in violation of court orders, Secretary Noem acted on the fascist dreams of her leader and sent immigrants to offshore detention centers. Noem wasted millions to fly immigrants without criminal records to Guantanamo. And then she decided to enter into a $6 million deal with El Salvador government to disappear and mistakenly deport a legal resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, in addition, a hairdresser, soccer players, 8 women to a men's prison, and a long list of immigrants with no criminal records. The list includes a young man from Chicago whose family had no idea how to reach him after recognizing him in an authoritarian propaganda video of Noem touring the prison. All while Trump, Noem, and Rubio weaponized immigration enforcement against activists and dissenting voices like legal permanent resident Mahmoud Khalil, international student Rumisa Ostork, and labor rights organizer Alfredo Lelo Juarez. In 3 months, Trump and Noem have abused the power of the Department of Homeland Security to pursue a campaign of persecution, of mass incarceration, and deportation. Day after day, Noem disregards the authority of Congress, the laws of the land, the constitutional rights of residents, the court's due process, and every check and balance that protects us from fascist authoritarians. There is no way in hell that I'm giving this administration one more dollar to violate our rights and criminalize our communities. And further, Noem must resign from her position as Secretary of Homeland Security. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a letter demanding Noem's resignation as the Secretary of Homeland Security.
So ordered, and I believe the gentlelady's time has expired.
It is now. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Okay, she yields. Just to let everybody know, I think Secretary Noem's coming in May the 14th. But anyway, who's next? Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you.
She accused Kristi Noem and DHS of deporting legal residents, detaining activists, and even sending children, including a 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer, into deportation proceedings without lawyers. Think about that for a moment. A sick child, fighting for his life, denied basic rights that every human being is supposed to have. Ramirez reminded everyone that DHS claimed the child's mother consented to their deportation, but when pressed, the department couldn't provide any evidence. The attorney for the family said no such consent was ever given, and if that sounds outrageous, Ramirez said this wasn't an isolated case. Multiple U.S. citizen children had been deported under Noem's watch. Her voice didn't waver. Her message was clear: this wasn't incompetence. It was a deliberate policy. But that, Ramirez warned, was just the beginning. Next came the revelation that stunned the chamber. According to Ramirez, Noem struck a $6 million deal with the government of El Salvador. The purpose? To disappear immigrants. Legal residents, soccer players, hairdressers, students, people with no criminal records were suddenly whisked away to foreign prisons. Take the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, a legal resident mistakenly deported. His family had no idea what had happened until they saw his face on a propaganda video. A video released by El Salvador's government showcasing its prisons as Kristi Noem toured the facility like a VIP guest. Imagine that. You don't get a phone call, you don't get a letter. You turn on the TV and see your missing loved one paraded for cameras in a foreign prison. And this wasn't one tragic mistake. Ramirez claimed there was a long list of names, people vanished, deported, and detained, while DHS brushed it off as administrative errors. But then came something even darker. Ramirez painted a picture that left no room for spin. She described 2-year-old children forced to face immigration courts without legal representation, families who had followed every legal step to apply for asylum, only to have their appointments canceled overnight. And yes, sick children, even those battling cancer, thrown into the system without counsel. Think about that. A child hooked up to IV lines in a hospital, then expected to navigate America's immigration bureaucracy alone. Ramirez made it clear this wasn't a system failing at the margins. It was cruelty built into policy. And while children suffered, she said this administration was burning through taxpayer money like never before. If you thought this was just about human rights, Ramirez wanted you to see the numbers. She pointed out that DHS had already wasted $300 million in just 6 weeks, militarizing the border. Another $200 million was funneled into what she called a propaganda campaign, glossy ads designed to stoke fear of immigrants. Added up and you're looking at $500 million spent in a matter of weeks. And yet Ramirez said Congress was being asked to approve an additional $69 billion. No hearings, no testimony, no oversight. She asked the question no one wanted to answer: how could lawmakers pour billions more into an agency accused of violating court orders, defying Congress, and shredding due process? But Ramirez wasn't finished. She said DHS wasn't just wasting money, it was targeting people. Here's where the accusations became chilling. Ramirez claimed DHS was being used not to protect Americans, but to silence dissent. She named activists, students, and organizers who were allegedly detained or deported for their beliefs. Mek Morcalo, a legal permanent resident; Ramisa Otor, an international student; Alfredo Lilo Juarez, a labor rights organizer. None of them had serious criminal records. What they had in common was that they spoke out. According to Ramirez, DHS under Noem had turned into a weapon, not against threats but against voices that challenged the administration. And if that sounds familiar, it's because history has shown us this playbook before. Ramirez didn't sugarcoat it. She said what many were already thinking: this wasn't just about immigration enforcement, it was authoritarian creep, not the loud kind with tanks in the streets, the quiet kind, the kind that hides behind paperwork, court delays, and endless administrative errors. It looked like canceled asylum appointments, secret offshore detention deals, families searching in vain for loved ones. It looked like DHS ignoring judges, bypassing Congress, and carrying on as if laws didn't apply. Ramirez called it exactly what it was: the architecture of authoritarianism. And then she laid down her demand. Ramirez called for Kristi Noem to testify under oath before Congress, and she called for her resignation. There is no way in hell, Ramirez thundered, that I'm giving this administration $1 more to violate our rights and criminalize our communities. Her words echoed through the chamber: Kristi Noem must resign, not next month, not after hearings, immediately. But here's the real question: will anyone act? Delia Ramirez's speech wasn't just a political outburst, it was a warning. If the allegations are true, DHS isn't acting as a guardian of security, it's acting as a weapon against immigrants, activists, students, and even children. And it's happening quietly, with your money, in your name, without your consent. This is how democracies erode, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 cuts. If due process can be denied to immigrants today, what's to stop it from being denied to anyone tomorrow? So the question isn't just whether Kristi Noem should resign, the question is how much longer are we willing to look away? Because if we stay silent, one day we'll wake up and realize the Constitution didn't collapse overnight. It was dismantled quietly, piece by piece, while we weren't paying attention, and by then it might be too late. If you think these allegations need answers, share this video, drop a comment with your thoughts. Should Kristi Noem testify? Should she resign? And if you want to keep following voices like Rep. Ramirez as they push for accountability, make sure you subscribe. Because this isn't about left or right, it's about whether the Constitution still means something, or whether it's already slipping away.